Because if you honestly want to evaluate this Dallas Cowboys football team, they have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL, especially on the offensive side of the football, with a guy in Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Des Bryant, what he used to be anyway. And then, honestly, one of the best unit in the NFL in terms of the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. So the lack of creativity on the offensive side of the football at times with this overall staff when it comes to Jason Garrett and then Scott Linehan as the offensive coordinator, and then Ryan Marinelli on the defensive side of the football, where he's done a backup job, obviously dealing with what he's had to get the most out of the talent that he has there. But Jason Garrett has not put this team in a position where consistently they perform year after year after year, and that's ultimately what, if you're a Dallas Cowboy fan, what's frustrating. It's already bad enough that this franchise hasn't won a Super Bowl in 22 years, but it's more frustrating to see a coach have a lack of creativity on the offensive side of the football, because honestly, I would love to see Sean Payton become the head coach of this Dallas Cowboy football team if we're going to put our cards on the table from a creativity and an offensive standpoint, because I think he would turn Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott into monsters on the offensive side of the football, better than what they already are. But what's frustrating is the lack of consistency. As Ben, you mentioned, what at times seemed as the lack of fire that Jason Garrett has as a coach. And obviously this is a guy who's settled with the status quo of being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, but a lot of mediocrity has surrounded this franchise, and it starts at the top with Jason Garrett. And until Jerry Jones makes a conscious decision, which I don't believe he will, to remove Jason Garrett as football coach, you're going to continue to see this kind of mediocrity for this football team, because that's what Jason Garrett has portrayed over the last now 8 seasons. And until there's a change at the top in terms of head coach, it's going to be this way. But I do believe he should be on the hot seat. Is he necessarily on it? No, because he's Jerry Jones' second adopted son behind Tony Romo. But at the same time,
Exactly. And another funny comment, Angry Black Man, you just been on a roll today. Congratulations. He says, Terrence Williams is still on the Cowboys? Who knew? Yeah, we know, okay? Because we watch him every single Sunday. Okay, dropping balls and not running out of bounds. But go ahead, Tyler. What's your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, he should have never been a head coach to begin with. I've never liked Jason Garrett since, to me, he sabotaged Wade Phillips out of a head coaching job. It was inexcusable. The number one fault with Dallas is they have an inability to adapt. They are as good as all of their pieces are. But if you take one piece away from that puzzle, they crumbles. And that's a sign of a horrible head coach and coaching staff. Tony Romo goes down. They can't win a game. DeMarco Murray gets hurt. Offense looks different. Dez goes down. No receiver steps up. Zeke is out. Sean Lee is out. The defense is trash. That all falls onto the head coach and his coaching staff that's underneath him, but they're just a reflection of him. And he's never had the ability to adapt. And with that, just like Kevin said, you're just going to get a bunch of mediocrity. And that's why the Dallas Cowboys continue to go 8-8 every single season. Because one piece of the puzzle is taken away, and they just don't know what the hell to do.
Yeah. I think the other part of this as well is that we think we're okay. This coaching staff, obviously, that this has got to be the answer. And if I'm wrong, maybe one of them should say something different. But they just think we're okay. We're doing great right now. We just went 12-4 2 years ago, so everything else is good. We'll be fine. We're not worried about it. We're just gonna backfill some spots. We'll be right there in the mix. No, that's not it. You are not great. You are not on the cusp of winning something really great. They're just not. So they have to be honest. Like at some point, this whole coaching staff, this whole organization has to realize that they have been average for the past 25 years. Look in the mirror and just know that that's the truth. You can convince yourself that it's not the truth. You can say that it's not, but it is. It's the truth. You're average. A lot of teams have already surpassed you in ability and technique and skill and just being able to be creative. So I think that's another huge part of this. Jelani, it looks like he's got a question. He says, if Dak has the season he had last year, of course Zeke played a part, is Tony Romo still around? I think Tony win more games in that situation. So I guess he's saying if there was Tony Romo last year instead of Dak, do you think we would have won more games? And I'm going to say no, because Romo wouldn't have made it through the season. he would have fell apart between game 1 and 4. His body just was not able to withstand it. So I'm going to answer that question and say no, I don't think we would have, because he wouldn't have made it a full season. So here we are again with go ahead if you guys wanted to chime in on that question.
I was just going to say, honestly, I think it even goes back to the 2016 season, because there was only a few people on this island, on Romo Island. I think it was me, Bomani Jones, and a couple others who were on Romo Island back in 2016, where I thought Tony Romo should have been inserted back into the lineup when he was ready to go and healthy to play back in the 2016 season, when they wind up winning, going 13-3 and getting the number 1 seed in the NFC, because at the time I thought that the offense was much more explosive under Tony Romo when he was running that offense more so than Dak Prescott. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys made the decision to continue to go with the hot hand in Dak Prescott, but I was one of the very few folks who was like, put Tony Romo back in this lineup, because we saw what he was with Des Bryant in terms of being a much more explosive receiver with Tony Romo as the quarterback, and we've seen the decline in Des Bryant under Dak Prescott as a receiver. So I think it goes back to even a couple of years ago and the trajectory of what this franchise could have been if Tony Romo is inserted back into the lineup. I don't think we ever see Dak Prescott necessarily, at least this soon, than what we already have with him being the starter for the Dallas Cowboys, because that team in 2016 was extremely talented on both sides of the football and had an opportunity, a bend but not break defense in 2016, but a very good offense that allowed them an opportunity to win those 13 games. But I was one of the very few that said Tony Romo should have been back in the lineup because of what he had become, especially over those previous couple of seasons before that, and putting himself in a position where he was not turning the football over as he used to in the past, and was a much more mature quarterback when it came to the Dallas Cowboy football team. But obviously, we saw what's happened over the last couple of years, and Tony Romo moving on after being cut. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't think he would have done any better than what he did, than Dak Prescott did a year ago, given what was surrounding him and how bad the offensive line was at times and how inconsistent at times his defense was on the other side of the football, especially with a young secondary that at times had some rookie and some immature mistakes. So I think either one of them would have done the same, given the situation last year with Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah. So another comment in here by Angry Black Man. He says, full disclosure, Jelani is a Lions fan, so he sympathized with Cowboys fans since they share mediocrity.
Well,
who are you a fan of, sir? Who are you a fan of, Angry Black Man?
We've never experienced 0-16, so I don't necessarily identify with that. So
no one quite knows that feeling but Jelani. But Angry Black Man, who is your team? Because I want to know right now. Because if it's any team that sucks, I'm getting ready to go in on them in just a moment. So put your team in the chat room, because I really do want to know, and we'll see. So we look at the moves that we've made. We look at where we're going. We already talked about the Witten, restructuring. Byron Jones. This has been a story, seems like, since the season was over with. Byron Jones moving back to corner, which he has flexibility to play corner or safety, but the talks are now that he's moving back to corner. I think I agree with this. I think also Xavier Woods, I think he is going to be a nice safety, and obviously with the draft coming up as well, we have some flexibility there. But do you agree with Byron Jones going back to corner, which was his original position, or do you like him at safety? Tyler, start with you.
Yeah. Just to quickly answer that Tony Romo question.
Oh.
I do think we would have been better suited with Tony Romo, only because Tony Romo was the offensive coordinator. He was a little bit more comfortable in that system where Dak was. Dak has a tendency to throw the ball towards players' feet. Hence the reason why Dez's numbers have plummeted a little bit. A lot of it has to do with Dez, skills diminishing, but also our quarterback is not putting him in the best position. So I do think Tony Romo would have won some of those games. But as far as Byron Jones, he should have. I like him at the corner only because of his physique. He's not the best tackling safety. There was a lot of missed tackles last year. He's not really considered a ball hawk either. So safety, I didn't like that position for him. But as a slot corner, he did have a lot of promise. I think it was one game where he covered Grunt the whole game, and I was impressed. So I do love the move back to cornerback for Byron Jones.
Okay. And, you know, he has been seen as a tight end whisperer. I mean, whenever he's matched up against a tight end, we have seen most of the time those tight ends get shut down. Moving them back to corner, I think this says a lot about either the secondary that they have or that you're looking to draft a safety early in the draft. But Kevin, what were your thoughts on this Byron Jones story?
I mean, it's interesting given the division that the Cowboys play in. Byron Jones is going to get tested week after week, and I'm not sure because especially if the Dallas Cowboys believe that he's going to be the number one corner on this team, that means on a weekly basis, at least twice a year, you're going to face Odell Beckham Jr., you're going to face a guy in Alshon Jeffrey twice a year in this division. And as athletic as Byron Jones is, I think he is much better in the safety position, given the fact that he can be a ball hawk, a guy who can lay the wood down on you in the secondary. And I believe, as Tyler mentioned, can do a good job covering tight ends. What you're asking Byron Jones now to do, especially if they believe he's going to be the number one corner, is to cover a team's best receiver. And I don't know if he can necessarily do that. His athleticism is out of this world. We all know how much of an athletic freak he is, but I don't know if he could cover Odell Beckham. I don't know if he can even cover Alshon Jeffrey. And when you look at the teams that the Cowboys are going to be playing this year, it's going to be interesting to see who he will be able to cover and how good he can be as a team's number one corner, because it's tough sledding in that NFC East division. And if I had to put money on it, as of right now, if Odell Beckham is not, doing whatever he does, he's going to torch Byron Jones. So it's going to be an interesting move for a guy who's 6 feet, 205. But questions will be, can he hold up in terms of his speed with some of the receivers that he's going to have to cover in this division? So it's an interesting move. I think he will be better served to stay as the safety for this Dallas Cowboys football team, but at the same time, I understand the wanting to tap into his athleticism that he has and what that would look like in covering wide receivers out in space. But it's going to be an interesting move, to say the least, for sure.
Yeah. All right, so you were tuned in to the BS3 Sports Show. Once again, we have Tyler Butler and Kevin Gray on the line, part of the X Squad. Kevin Gray hosts the show Clutch Talk Sports Radio. You can find that on TuneIn on Sports Radio America, Mondays and Fridays, 7 to 9 Central. And then we have Tyler Butler, who is a part of the Enough with the BS podcast, which is on Spreaker. I believe that's every other week. Comes out on Sunday, going into Monday. He dives into so many topics So his topics are very, very. You'll learn something definitely when you're listening. Also, Kevin Gray has